Hi everyone, welcome back. Today's video is going to be on my top 5 and bottom 5 eyeshadow palettes that are in my collection. My friend Dominica just suggested this to me, I think it was last week, and I was like, well, that's genius. I love talking about eyeshadow palettes. You really can't get me to shut up about them. So I thought I would film this video. Before we get into this though, I have to point out that there's not a lot of eyeshadow palettes in my collection that I truly hate because I don't see the point in keeping makeup if you don't like it. There are products in my collection, however, that are mediocre, but I keep them for posterity, which is kind of stupid. But there isn't stuff generally that I truly hate in my collection, so you may not get a lot of vitriol in this video about them. Now that I say that, there is one palette in here I'm gonna basically shit talk because it's terrible. As for the favorites, that was not easy. There were a few that I knew right off the bat that they were perfect palettes, so I snatched them. But even just now, as I was about to start talking about them, I ran over to the bedroom and grabbed another one and swapped one out because I was like, no, you're better than this one. Okay, let's just get into this. The first ones I'm gonna talk about are my bottom 5. And the one that is on top was just a disappointment from the get-go. It is the Too Faced Peanut Butter and Honey palette. I was so excited for this thing because I loved the peanut butter and jelly palette. It was so exciting. It was so fun. I loved the tones in it. I loved not only the peanut butter aspect to it, but also the jelly aspect to it. It just was perfect to me. So when they kind of released a follow-up to it, I was so pumped and I ordered it immediately, and I love the color scheme. I mean, it's a neutral palette with a pop of yellow, but it still seemed fun to me. And then I use them and I'm just like, why? Why are you so bad? The shadows are, I don't know, I want to say fine-ish, but they all don't blend together that nicely. One of my major problems was the fact that this side panel over here was so same in comparison to the peanut butter and jelly palette. With that palette, you've got, like, for me, a brow bone highlight shade, but you had a gold shade in the middle, and then I can't remember what the other one was, but it was like a bit of a transition color for me, I think. With this one, they basically all look identical. You've essentially got two creams and two cream white colors on either end, and then like a lightly pink tinted color. Like, just unnecessary. So that's kind of boring, and those are the biggest pans in there. But then when you get into these colors, they just don't blend that nicely onto the skin. And the deepest color in here, going nuts, is shimmery, which annoys me. I want the deepest color in a palette to be a matte color. That's just me. I don't know if everybody agrees with that, but I don't think having your deepest color as a shimmer is very helpful to most people. So that annoyed me. And I mean, it's still pretty to look at, and honestly, I can't really tell you why I'm holding on to this thing because I never reach for it. But man, this was so disappointing. You know, it's funny, at the start of this video, I put that disclaimer out that there's not a lot of palettes in my collection that I truly hate, but I mean, I don't hate this one. I have got a lot of negative things to say about it, but I still don't hate it, and I'm still holding on to it. Okay, so the next palette is probably like the absolute bottom palette that I have, like the worst one that I still own, and it is the Too Faced White Peach palette. You know, Too Faced just doesn't do good follow-up palettes is what I'm noticing. They followed up Peanut Butter and Jelly with the Honey palette, and Honey was crap, and they followed up the Just Peachy Mattes palette, which was excellent, with this White Peach palette, and this thing is just miserable. It's miserable. There is like no pigmentation in this thing. It's just a light, barely medium shade range of a mess. It's just a mess. The darkest color in here is essentially a black, but you know what doesn't go with a ton of light shades? Black. If I want to deepen up any of the other colors, if I exclude the purple, with just the black, like, I'm not gonna get a good look. If I add black to this baby pink, it's going to look terrible, and it does look terrible. This palette is just an absolute dud, and it makes no sense because Just Peachy Mattes was such a knockout palette. I still go back to that one all the time. It's fantastic. But this one is just a light mess of colors. Some of them are quite pretty on their own, but it's almost not worth having this palette just for singular colors because I'd rather reach for an eyeshadow single in my collection. Oh, what, it just made me completely unhappy. It's just an unhappy product. I don't know why it's still in my collection. I should probably get rid of it, but I'm still holding on to it for some unknown reason. Maybe at the end of this video, I'm just gonna get rid of these bottom 5 palettes because there's really not much use having them. Okay, here's one that I've kept just because it's pretty and it was personalized for me. And it's the Urban Decay Naked 3 palette. I had initially bought the Naked 3 when it first launched, and I did use it quite a bit back then. But I eventually got rid of that palette and kept this one instead when it was personalized for me at the Urban Decay Square One launch event because it's something a little bit unique. But that launch event was what, 2 or 3 years ago? And I've not used a single one of these shades since then. This thing is in pristine condition, which just goes to show you that these colors are not up my alley at all. I never think to reach for it. I don't really want to put dusty pink colors on my eyes anymore. I mean, there was a point in time where I was really into it, but now I'm just like, oof, it's just boring to me. It's a taupey, slightly pinky, neutral toned palette, and it's just not for me. But I am keeping this one for sure just because it's a good memory. I really enjoyed going to that launch party a few years ago with Urban Decay, and it's got my name on it. It says Shell right here. So yeah, I'm keeping it for that reason, but I do not care about the colors in this palette anymore at all. The 4th palette that is in my bottom 5 is one that it just didn't work out really. It's the Smashbox Covershot palette in Pinks and Palms, which you would never know from the front of this because it's got the boring packaging that they use on most of their Covershot palettes. And I initially picked this up because it's beautiful. Like, the colors in here just look really, really pretty, but they just don't perform very well. I've kept it because the color scheme is still pretty, and I still think that I will one day reach for it and discover a beautiful eyeshadow combination with this thing. But that day almost never comes, or it has not come. I think I've used this maybe twice, and both times I was like, pigmentation's a little bit weak. And I really like the look of this matte mint color over here because it looks like it should go well with the rest of the palette, but it really doesn't. I have nothing to blend it with really. And I think one time I put it on my lower lash line and it basically just disappeared. So yeah, what a bummer palette this was. Ugh, I wanted to love it so much, but it was a dud. And the last one I'm going to talk about is one where I'm just not inspired by it. I don't reach for it ever. I bought it and I thought I was going to be excited by it, but I just am not. It's the Tartelette Toasted palette. This came out at the very tail end of the warm eyeshadow kind of like launch schedule that all the brands seem to be following. And when this came out, I remember most people were like, okay, Tarte, like, too late. You're like holding on to the end of the bandwagon here. No one cares about warm eyeshadow palettes anymore. And that's not necessarily true, but it did make me laugh because Tarte was so slow to put this out. So this palette is pretty looking, but I never feel like I get a look that I'm in love with. And I think it's because this one suffers from the same issue as the Urban Decay Naked Heat, in the sense that everything just starts to look the same. It's depressing, it's sad. I need to pull it out more because it is, I'm looking at it now and I like the colors, but I have no good memory attached to this palette. I never used it and thought, wow, my eyeshadow looks pretty today. It just kind of faded into the background. So yeah, I mean, how many years ago did this come out? Maybe 2 years? And it's kind of just sat in my collection neglected, hoping for that one day where I'll be like, oh, I pick you today. But I never do. Okay, moving on to my top 5 eyeshadow palettes. It's a little bit difficult because there's a lot of things that I like in my collection, but I chose these 5 and they're my favorites for now. The first one I'm going to talk about is what I'm wearing right now, and I think it's just a perfect palette. It's the Suva Beauty Saffron Palette. I love everything about this thing. It's very warm toned focus, but there's some colors in here that really surprised me. So initially I was like, okay, I'm definitely into Paprika because it's so red and so bright. But then I was like, how the heck am I going to use this palette when there's no real transition color? But actually, you can use Paprika as a transition color. It's what's in the top of my crease right now. You can apply it not as heavily and still get like a nice, almost a pinky red transition color, but you can also use cinnamon in that respect too, and that one has a little bit more brown in it, but it can come across quite red, which makes me very happy. The other colors in here are also very exciting. Saffron is kind of a, it's like, honestly, it's kind of like cinnamon, but just with that shimmery edge to it, like they kind of fit in the same sort of tone. Turmeric down here is a beautiful gold color. So, so pretty to wear. And then coriander up here is funny. First of all, I don't associate coriander or cilantro, same thing, with a white color, but I think the seed is that kind of cream color. So it looks really bland in the pan. You would never think that it's a cool shade, but actually it's got a little bit of kind of a champagne sort of twist to it. It's beautiful. I love Clove because it's a great color to put as the outer corner color to deepen something up. Today I've got it on the whole lid to make a smoky eye. Ginger is the perfect brow bone color. And then this one down here, Star Anise, that was weird. I didn't think I was gonna like that color, and then I put it on my eye and I was like, whoa, you're transformative. So this palette just makes me happy. It is a perfect color combination no matter what shades you use in here, and I'm so impressed by that because there's only 9 shades. And usually I can feel a little bit restricted by a 9-pan eyeshadow palette because I don't feel like there's enough in there to create variety. This one has all of that. The next one is one that I have talked about so much, I feel like, in the last year that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it, and that is the NYX Ultimate Shadow Palette in the shade Brights. They have different versions of this. The Brights one, though, is really just perfect. I reach for this all the time. If I'm wearing a colorful eyeshadow look, I'm almost always going back to this palette to add either a transition color or to amp up another eyeshadow or to blend something out. It's just perfect. It goes with every colorful eyeshadow palette that I have because it has the full color wheel in here. And most of them are matte in here. There are a few shimmers, but some of them aren't that shimmery, so I can basically use them as a matte. I think the shimmeriest one in here is this kind of like turquoisey one down here. The red has a little bit of sparkle, but it basically just dusts away. So this is like the perfect additional palette for any other palette that I have that's colorful. I reach for it so much that I can't say enough good things about this. It truly is one of my most workhorse palettes in my collection just because I use it with all the other palettes that I own. The next palette I'm going to talk about is one that I have recently mentioned in a video, but I just love this one so much that I'm going to talk about it again. It is the ColourPop Chasing Rainbows palette. This came out for holidays 2018 for ColourPop, but I don't know, is it a permanent product? Because it's still available on their website and I feel like it doesn't say limited edition, which would make me happy because this thing is perfect. And it's only 20 bucks. Only 20 bucks. I don't know how ColourPop does it. So this is beautiful. It's just beautiful. I reach for this all the time, and more recently I've actually started to ignore some of my more recent makeup palette purchases because I wanted to go back and use this one, which speaks volumes, I think, because I own over 100 palettes. You can see that video if you want. I'll link to it down below. It's like a palette collection video. But when you own that many palettes and you constantly go back to one in particular, you know you must really love it, and that's this palette for me. So I don't know, I think I wore this twice in the last week to work, and I have 3 other palettes that are brand new sitting on my counter, and I was like, nah, I don't want to use you today because I want to use Chasing Rainbows. I feel like the color scheme in here is just very up my alley because I get some of these warmer orangey tones, I get more of a bright sunshiny yellow, and then I really like the, well, this was like a blue-brown kind of pigment, but I also really like the turquoisey blues down here. I even really like this kind of silver color, and I like it because it's got a bit of a dirty tinge to it. It's not just a bright silver, which I've kind of gotten tired of over the years. There's just a little bit more dimension to this shade in particular. So yeah, I just love this palette, and I can't recommend it to enough people, and this palette will absolutely be in my video at the end of the year of like my favorite palettes because it is just perfect. So one of these top 5 palettes is not one that I talk about very much, and I'm not really sure why, because I do use it quite consistently, especially if I want to create a fun and unique eyeshadow look. And that is the Juvia's Place Masquerade Mini palette. Oh, this one is just like all these other ones that I'm talking about, perfect. It has 2 full rows of bright colors, and those 2 rows are generally the shades that I reach for the most. But I've actually had a lot of good experiences with mixing the colorful products with the more neutral toned ones on the bottom. I mean, it's funny that this palette actually is so different top to bottom. If you like block out the bottom 2 rows, you would just think it's like a bright rainbow palette. And then if you block out the top 2 rows, you would just think it's neutral. Like, it's an interesting mix, isn't it? Because some people might just be drawn to those colors, but then they can play around with the colors. Versus for me, I play around with the color and then sometimes incorporate a little bit of the neutrals. And the shades that I really like for that are this kind of rusty red color down here called Ada. I mix that in with some of these pinky and purple tones up here, and I get a really cool look out of that. One of my complaints about this palette is that there's not enough matte colors in here for me. I mean, there are more mattes in the neutral zone, but I want more mattes in the shimmery zone. But honestly, that's a small complaint, and this is still one of my top 5 palettes, so I'm really not complaining that much. But yeah, this is just, it's funny to me that some of these palettes that I'm talking about are actually some of the cheaper ones in my collection. Like Juvia's Place is what? This might be 20 bucks. That ColourPop one was only $20, and the NYX one is also another $20 palette. There's a lot of great inexpensive eyeshadow palettes on the market, and this one is definitely one of them. And the very last palette I'm going to talk about is one that I feel like I've talked about quite a bit before as well, but I mean, just goes to show you that it's one of my favorites. It's the Violet Voss Hashtag palette. I love this thing so much. It is a perfect palette. I keep saying that, but I mean, that's how I should feel about my top 5, right? Is that they're perfect. It's just lovely. It's just a gorgeous palette. I love everything about this. I love the fact that we're broken down into like a neutral row of all mattes, that I have this yellow to orange row, that I have this orange to sort of pinky row, and then this purple row down here. There is not a color combination that I have put together with this palette that I have not loved. I have done reddish pink sunset eyes. I've done gold purple eyes. They're all beautiful, and I'm always so happy with everything that comes out of this. The shimmers are buttery soft. They are so nice to apply. The pigmentation is intense, and then the mattes blend so beautifully, not only with the shimmery colors, but also amongst themselves. And matte colors can sometimes really struggle when you layer them on top of each other, and I feel like sometimes they're just arguing back and forth about which one's gonna like dust off the eye or whatever. You don't get that problem with this palette. They all just work really well together. And honestly, when I first got this palette, I think I was a little bit worried about having that matte black in there, because I was like, I'm not gonna deepen up any of these shades with that color. But somehow it worked. The tones in here are leaning towards the medium to slightly deep at times, and the black just helps add a little bit of extra oomph. Unlike with the White Peach palette, where you've got that black with pale shades, that doesn't work at all. But the black in here does work because they are more medium, sometimes a little bit deep on my skin tone. So I love this thing. I love this thing so much. Also, to mention the fact that it's in cardboard packaging. I love cardboard packaging so much more than anything that's plastic. The only one that was plastic amongst my favorites was this one by NYX, but that's just truly down to the fact that these shades are impeccable. But cardboard packaging, man, that's where it's at for me. I do not like plastic. I feel like it's too, I don't like that. I don't like that feeling. So that's gonna be it for this video. Those are the top 5 and bottom 5 palettes in my eyeshadow collection. As of this moment in time, I might go back into my bedroom and be like, oh, I forgot to talk about that one. But for the moment, these are the palettes that made the cut. I hope you found this interesting. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and thank you to Dominica for suggesting it in the first place. I will catch you guys next time. Bye.